The lecture hall of Caro's station curved inward like the inside of a massive eye. Tiered rows of seats rose in smooth arcs, each one filled with cadets from across the Union, tall, scaled bodies beside soft-furred forms, chitinous limbs folded neatly beside shimmering, translucent skin. The air carried a blend of scents that didn't belong together: iron, citrus, something sweet, something sharp, each species leaving its own invisible trace in the shared space. At the center of the hall stood a raised platform of pale alloy, polished to a mirror sheen. Behind it, a wide holographic display shimmered faintly, waiting. Instructor Vale stood alone at the platform. He was tall even by Union standards, his frame lean and elongated, his skin a matte gray broken by faint lines that pulsed with dim bioluminescence. Four narrow eyes sat evenly across his face, each one focused on a different section of the room as if he were already studying every cadet at once. The room was loud. Not chaotic, but alive, voices layered over each other in dozens of languages, filtered imperfectly through translation implants. Clicks, hums, soft whistles, the occasional low growl of amusement. Some cadets leaned toward one another, sharing speculation about the lecture topic. Others scanned the room, cataloging unfamiliar species. A few sat rigid and silent, absorbing everything. Vale did not interrupt them. He simply waited. The subtle shift came gradually. A few cadets noticed the stillness at the center of the room. Conversations tapered. One voice dropped, then another. Within seconds, the layered noise unraveled into silence that spread outward like a ripple across water. Only then did Vale move. "Good," he said. His voice carried without effort, smooth and controlled, threaded through the hall's acoustic systems so cleanly it felt like he was standing beside each listener individually. "You are capable of silence. That will be useful." A faint flick of his upper hand activated the display behind him. Light spilled into the air, coalescing into the image of a star system, distant, cold, unremarkable at first glance. "This course," Vale continued, "is designated Hazard Intelligence and Survival Response. It is not theoretical. It is not optional. And it is not forgiving." A few cadets shifted in their seats. Vale's lower hands folded behind his back. "You have all been selected because your species survived its world. That does not mean you will survive the galaxy." The hologram shifted. The star system zoomed inward, resolving into a single planet, dark, dense clouds wrapped tightly around its surface, streaked with violent storms that flashed with silent lightning. "Myrick 4, Vale said. "Class 6 hostile biosphere." The image fractured into layers, peeling back the atmosphere to reveal movement beneath. Something large, something fast. A new shape formed. A creature, low to the ground, its body segmented and armored, limbs too numerous to track at a glance. Its head split open along 3 seams, revealing a ring of inward-facing teeth that rotated slowly, almost lazily. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. "This organism," Vale said calmly, "detects vibration through solid ground. It does not require sight. It does not require sound. If you are standing, it knows where you are." The creature lunged forward in the simulation, its body unfolding with sudden, violent speed. Average engagement survival time, 12 seconds. The image froze. No dramatic emphasis. No raised voice. Just fact. Vale let the silence hold for a moment before continuing. The display shifted again. A new world appeared, bright, almost beautiful. Wide oceans of deep blue, scattered landmasses, thick white cloud formations drifting lazily across the surface. "Let his prime," he said. The calm image lingered just long enough for a few cadets to relax. Just a fraction. Then the ocean surface split apart. Something rose from below. A long, sinuous body, smooth and reflective like liquid metal. No visible eyes. No distinct head. Just a widening opening along its front that peeled back to reveal layers of thin, needle-like structures arranged in tight spirals. "Ambush predator," Vale said. "Resides beneath thermal layers. Detects electromagnetic fluctuations generated by neural activity." A murmur, quieter this time. It does not hunt movement, he continued. It hunts thought. The creature surged upward, engulfing a smaller shape in the simulation before vanishing back into the depths as if it had never been there. Survival rate after detection, negligible. The room had gone very still. Vale's eyes moved slowly across the cadets, reading their reactions. Fear in its early stages. The hologram shifted once more. This time, the environment was harsh, jagged terrain, sharp ridges of black stone rising from a landscape lit by a dim, distant sun. The air itself looked heavy, distorted by heat and pressure. Gorath expanse, Vale said. Surface gravity, 1.8 standard. Atmospheric density, lethal to most unprotected species within minutes. A shape detached itself from the rocks. It had been there the entire time. Flat, motionless, indistinguishable from the terrain until it moved. When it did, it unfolded in a cascade of limbs and edges, its body reconfiguring itself mid-motion into something built entirely for violence. It does not pursue, Vale said. It becomes. The creature struck. The simulation ended before impact. No one spoke. Vale let the silence deepen, stretch, settle. Then, very slightly, he inclined his head. You are observing a pattern, he said. No one answered. They are faster than you, he continued. Stronger than you. Better adapted to their environments than you will ever be. The pause. And yet, your species survived. That line lingered differently. Not comfort. Not reassurance. A question. Vale stepped forward, just enough that the light caught the faint glow beneath his skin. This lecture, he said, is not about what kills. Another small movement of his hand. The hologram dimmed, the violent worlds dissolving into darkness. It is about what cannot be avoided. The display flickered once, then stabilized. A new planet appeared. Blue, green, white clouds drifting in slow, peaceful patterns. Sunlight reflecting gently off vast oceans. Landmasses rich with color, alive in a way the previous worlds had not been. It looked safe. Several cadets leaned forward without realizing it. Vale watched them, and for the first time, something in his expression shifted. Subtle, almost imperceptible. This, he said quietly, is where we begin. The image hovered in the center of the hall, turning slowly in perfect silence. Blue oceans. Green continents. Soft white cloud systems drifting in gentle spirals. It looked like a place built for life, not survival. A low murmur spread through the cadets, confusion more than fear this time. After the horrors they had just seen, this world felt out of place. Almost disappointing. Vale let the reaction build. This world, he said, is classified as a Class 12 biosphere. The murmuring stopped. Even the translators seemed to hesitate for a fraction of a second before carrying the words across languages. Class 12. The highest classification in the Union. The number alone carried weight. Cadets leaned forward now, not out of curiosity, but tension. It didn't match. Nothing about the planet looked dangerous enough. Vale rotated the hologram slightly, bringing a wide ocean into focus. Designation, Earth, he said. Native name, Terra. A few cadets exchanged glances. Some had heard the name. Most had not. It does not resemble the environments previously shown, Vale continued. That is intentional. The ocean's surface shimmered. Then it broke. A new image formed, dark water, deep and endless. Something moved beneath it, just out of sight. A shape too large to fully perceive, its outline suggested only by absence. Light bending around it, currents shifting unnaturally. A sudden flash. A massive jaw erupted from below, rows of serrated teeth snapping shut around nothing before vanishing again into darkness. Several cadets recoiled. Carcharodon carcharias, Vale said evenly. Apex marine predator. Capable of detecting electrical signals emitted by living tissue. Attack velocity exceeds most reaction thresholds. The image shifted. A shoreline now, muddy, still, quiet. At first, nothing moved. Then the surface of the water twitched. Two eyes rose, just barely breaking through the film of algae and debris. A long, ridged back followed, almost indistinguishable from the surrounding terrain. It did not look like a creature. It looked like part of the world. Crocodylus porosus, Vale said. Ambush predator. Remains motionless for extended periods. Strike occurs within fractions of a second. The simulation played. A small animal approached the water. The surface exploded. Gone. The image froze again. No sound. No struggle. Just absence. The hall grew quieter. Vale continued without pause. A new environment, dense vegetation, golden light filtering through tall grass. Movement. Coordinated. Silent. Multiple shapes. Eyes. They moved together, adjusting positions without sound, without signal. Panthera Leo, Vale said. Group-based hunting. Target selection, encirclement, synchronized attack. The prey never saw them coming. The strike was fast, efficient, final. The display shifted again. A drifting form in open water, translucent, almost beautiful. Long trailing strands moving gently with the current. Harmless. Until contact. The simulation flared bright for a moment. Nervous system collapse mapped in glowing lines. Chironex fleckery, Vale said. Venom capable of inducing cardiac arrest within minutes. No centralized brain. A cadet in the upper rows made a quiet sound of discomfort. Vale did not acknowledge it. The images continued. Predators. Venom. Ambush. Endurance. Coordination. Different environments. Different methods. Same result. And yet, none of them felt like the thing. Not after what Vale had shown before. The pattern was incomplete. The tension in the room reflected it. Vale allowed one final image to linger, a wide savanna beneath an open sky. Heat shimmered in waves above the ground. In the distance, a herd moved slowly, unaware. Movement at the edge of the frame. Gray shapes. Controlled. Running. They did not sprint. They did not rush. They simply followed. The footage stretched. Minutes. Then more. The herd began to falter. One animal stumbled. Recovered. Stumbled again. The gray shapes did not change pace. They did not need to. The prey's movements became erratic. Its breathing visible now, labored, desperate. Still the shapes followed. Unhurried. Unstoppable. Eventually, the prey collapsed. The gray shapes closed in. The simulation ended before the final moment. Silence filled the hall. It was heavier now. Not shock. Understanding, almost, but not quite complete. Vale let it sit. Then he spoke. Everything you have observed, he said, operates within biological constraint. A few cadets frowned slightly, processing. They hunt because they must, he continued. They kill because they are designed to kill. Their behaviors, while complex, are ultimately predictable. The hologram dimmed slightly, as if the world itself were receding. They are dangerous, Vale said. The pause. But they are not the reason this world holds its classification. That landed. A subtle shift rippled through the room. Attention sharpened, focus narrowed. Vale turned slightly, his eyes sweeping across the tiers of cadets. There is a common error, he said, among those who study hostile ecosystems from a distance. No one moved. They assume that the most visible threats are the most important. Another pause. Vale made a small gesture. The vast planetary image dissolved. In its place, something far simpler appeared. A single figure. Bipedal. Standing upright. No claws. No armor. No visible weapons. Its proportions were unremarkable. Its posture relaxed. Its surface, soft, unprotected. Looked fragile. A quiet, uncertain sound passed through the hall. Not fear. Something closer to disbelief. One cadet in the lower rows let out a low, rumbling exhale that translated roughly as amusement. Vale did not react. This, he said, is the dominant species of Terra. The figure rotated slowly in the air. Plain. Unimpressive. Vulnerable. This organism, Vale continued, possesses no natural weapons capable of penetrating standard defensive tissue. Its bite force is minimal. Its dermal layer is easily damaged. It lacks speed, strength, and natural armor relative to most Apex-class organisms. Another ripple of quiet reactions. Agreement this time. Relief even. Of course. That made sense. Vale allowed exactly 3 seconds for that thought to settle. Yet, he said, it is the most dangerous entity on its world. Silence. Immediate. Total. The figure continued its slow rotation, unchanged. Nothing about it looked different. Nothing about it justified the statement. That was the problem. This species, Vale said, his voice steady, is designated Homo sapiens. He let the name hang in the air. A few cadets shifted in their seats now, not from fear, but discomfort. The pattern was breaking. Nothing they had seen supported this. Vale stepped slightly closer to the projection. I will explain, he said. The figure froze. Lines of light began to trace across its form, mapping internal structures, highlighting systems beneath the surface. Begin, Vale said quietly, by discarding your assumptions. The diagram expanded, layers separating in clean, precise lines. Muscle groups lit up in deep red, fibers overlapping in dense, complex arrangements. The skeletal frame beneath followed, pale and rigid, locking everything into place. Humans possess over 600 independent muscle structures, Vale said. Individually unremarkable. Collectively adaptable. The image shifted. One arm flexed slightly, tendons tightening, force translating smoothly through bone and joint. Their strength is not exceptional, he continued, but their control is. A few cadets leaned forward. Vale did not pause. Their skeletal system is dense, but more importantly, it is regenerative. Fractures do not end function. They initiate repair. A highlighted section of bone cracked in the projection, then reformed, thicker at the break point. Damage is recorded, Vale said, and corrected. The hull remained silent. Vale moved his hand again. The muscular system dimmed. A new layer ignited across the surface, millions of tiny points scattered across the skin. Thermoregulation, he said. The points began to pulse. Most species reduce activity under heat stress. They withdraw. They conserve. The image shifted, an external environment appeared. Bright, harsh sunlight. Dry terrain. Heat radiating visibly from the ground. The human figure began to move. Running. Not fast. Not aggressively. Just steady. The human body expels liquid across its surface, Vale continued. Evaporation removes heat. Internal temperature remains stable under conditions that incapacitate most known species. The projection split. On one side, the human continued moving, rhythmic, controlled. On the other, a larger, faster creature sprinted, then slowed, then stopped. Collapsed. The human kept going. No acceleration. No visible strain. Just persistence. This is not speed, Vale said. It is duration. The image faded. A faint tension crept into the room now. Not fear. Recognition beginning to form. Vale shifted again. The head of the human figure became transparent. A complex network lit up within, dense, branching, active. Their neural processing, he said, prioritizes pattern recognition. The display filled with shifting landscapes, forests, shadows, broken terrain. In each one, something moved. Barely visible. Hidden. The human outline reacted instantly, turning, focusing, identifying. Humans detect irregularity, Vale continued. Movement where there should be stillness. Stillness where there should be movement. The patterns accelerated. Faster. Harder to track. The humans still responded. They are not the most perceptive species, Vale said. But they are among the most suspicious. A few cadets shifted uncomfortably. That word landed. Vale dimmed the projection slightly. And when threat is confirmed, he said, their physiology changes. The internal systems flared. Heart rate increased. Blood flow surged. Neural signals intensified. A new label appeared across the display. Adrenal response. Under stress, Vale said, the human body enhances itself. The figure moved again, faster now. Stronger. Less controlled but more effective. Increased strength, Vale continued. Reduced pain perception. Accelerated reaction time. The simulation shifted. Damage indicators appeared across the figure. Severe. The human did not stop. Termination does not immediately follow critical injury, Vale said. That line settled heavily. Function continues, he added, until failure is absolute. No one moved. Vale let the systems fade back to neutral. For a moment, the human figure stood there again, plain, unimpressive. But it no longer felt that way. Not entirely. There is one final trait, Vale said. He did not activate the display immediately. Instead, he looked out across the hall, letting the silence stretch just long enough to tighten. The projection changed. A second figure appeared beside the human. Different shape. Four-legged. Predatory. The earlier running shapes. The two stood side by side. No aggression. No tension. Stillness. Humans form bonds, Vale said. The words seemed simple. They were not. With their own species, he continued. With other species. With entities that are not alive. With concepts. The human figure lowered one hand. It rested gently against the head of the predator. The predator did not react. It remained still. Once bonded, Vale said, the human will prioritize that connection above its own survival. A faint shift moved through the cadets. This was different. Not physical. Not mechanical. Something else. They will defend, Vale continued, without regard for cost. The display flickered, images overlapping briefly. A human placing itself between danger and another. A human returning to a threat instead of fleeing. A human refusing to stop. Vale let the images fade. Every trait described so far, he said, exists within biological systems. The pause. Strength. Endurance. Adaptation. Pattern recognition. Another pause. None of these are unique in isolation. The human figure dimmed slightly. But combined, Vale said, they produce something unusual. The hall was completely still now. Focused. Waiting. Vale's voice lowered, just slightly. A predator, he said, that does not rely solely on instinct. That line settled deeper than the others. Because now, they understood what was coming. Vale let the silence hold. Then he continued. Imagine, he said, a species capable of all the functions you have observed. A step forward. Now remove the requirement to act. No one moved. No one spoke. Imagine, Vale said quietly, that it can choose. The word lingered. It changed everything. A predator that does not hunt because it must, he continued, but because it decides to. The air in the hall felt different now. Heavier. Tighter. Vale turned slightly, his gaze moving across the rows. For most species, he said, behavior is constrained by need. Another step. For this one, the pause. It is constrained only by will. The projection behind him dimmed to near darkness. The human figure remained. Still unchanged, but no longer harmless. Vale let the silence stretch. 5 seconds. 10. Long enough that the absence of sound became its own pressure. There is a reason, he said softly, that this classification is not based solely on biology. A flicker of light. A new file began to load behind him, faint at first, incomplete. Something colder. Less theoretical. Vale did not look at it yet. Instead, he kept his eyes on the cadets. What you have seen, he said, is capability. The beat. What you are about to see. The display sharpened. A gray structure appeared. Angular. Industrial. Isolated against the void. Is application. The room did not move. No one shifted. No one spoke. Somewhere in the upper rows, a cadet's breathing had become audible. Vale finally turned to the projection. His posture changed just slightly. Less instructor. More witness. This recording, he said, has been partially restricted under union review. A faint hesitation. But real. It has been cleared for educational purposes. He paused. And for the first time since the lecture began, there was something like caution in his voice. Observe carefully. The station rotated slowly in the dark. Cold. Silent. Waiting. And somewhere in the hall, without anyone consciously noticing why, a few cadets began to look, not at the screen, but at each other. The station drifted in the void like something abandoned mid-thought. No lights on the outer hall. No visible traffic. No movement that suggested life at all. Only structure. Only function. Vale's voice remained steady, but the cadence had changed. Slower now, more deliberate, as if each word had to pass a threshold before being allowed into the air. Corvallis Station, he said. Union Commercial and Diplomatic Outpost. Outer Rim Sector. The hologram zoomed inward. Corridors appeared. Empty at first. Then populated. Civilians. Traders. Diplomats. Maintenance staff. A routine environment. A safe one. The station housed approximately 482 permanent occupants at the time of incident, Vale continued, with an additional 200 transient personnel. The image held. For a moment, nothing seemed wrong. Then the alarms began. Not sound, visual only. Red pulses spreading through corridor overlays. Bulkhead doors sealing. Movement changing direction abruptly. Cadets in the hall leaned forward again, pulled despite themselves. Vale did not stop. Drexery raiding vessel entered local space without warning, he said. 3 ships. Armed boarding capability. Intent confirmed, asset seizure and civilian extraction. The hologram shifted. Space outside the station lit up. 3 jagged silhouettes detached from darkness, moving fast. Too fast. A section of the station buckled inward. Then the breach. Air began to vent. Figures in corridors started running. The system tracked them in clean, clinical overlays, heat signatures, motion paths, panic routes. Security response, 12 personnel, Vale said. Outnumbered. Outmatched. The boarding sequence unfolded rapidly. Drexery forces poured into the station. Heavy. Methodical. They did not rush. They advanced. Every corridor they entered became controlled within seconds. Resistance was minimal. Efficiently removed. The hall remained silent. No one spoke now. Even the earlier curiosity had vanished. Vale watched the projection like he had seen it before. Many times. But not like this. Not with this group watching. Civilian containment initiated at Central Cargo Hub, he said. 214 individuals gathered. The hologram shifted again. A vast chamber appeared, dim, crowded, shaking slightly with distant structural stress. People pressed together. Different species. Different sizes. All reduced to the same thing. Waiting. The Drexery stood around them. Weapons lowered but present. Control was already established. Vale paused. This is the moment of leverage, he said. Standard procedure for ransom extraction. The image zoomed slightly. A Drexery commander stepped forward. Demands were issued. Audio still suppressed. Only subtitles appeared. Union credits. Transfer protocols. Time limits. Then silence. A timer appeared above the scene. Cadets watched it begin to tick. 1 hour passed. Nothing changed. 2 hours. The tension in the room tightened. 3. A shift. 1 civilian was pulled forward. An elderly figure. Resistance minimal. Execution efficient. No dramatization. Just termination. The hall reacted instinctively. Small movements, tightened posture, restrained discomfort. Vale did not acknowledge it. Compliance threshold enforcement, he said. The timer continued. For hours. Fear in the hologram increased visibly now. Panic spreading through the captive group. Attempts at resistance began. Crushed immediately. Vale's voice did not change. Situation stabilization maintained by force dominance. 6 hours. A new movement. Subtle. At first, almost missed. A small figure within the crowd. Human. Sitting near the outer wall. Still. Unremarkable. Vale zoomed in. The cadets followed without realizing they had leaned closer. The human was young, small even by her own species standards. Not moving, not reacting, just observing. A faint ripple passed through the hall. Recognition was beginning again. Vale's 4 eyes narrowed slightly. She was not initially flagged as significant, he said. No military affiliation. No known threat designation. The image held on her. Still seated. Still quiet. The timer continued. 7 hours. Another selection. Another civilian pulled forward. Another execution. The pattern was becoming clear. Predictable. Unstoppable. But the human still had not moved. Vale's voice lowered. Subject remained stationary for 3 hours and 47 minutes following breach. The pause. Then she stood up. The hall changed. Subtle tension snapped into focus. Vale did not increase volume. He did not need to. She moved without urgency, he said. No visible distress signal. No vocalization. No hesitation. The hologram tracked her path. She walked. Directly toward the nearest Drexery guard. Not fast. Not slow. Certain. A few cadets shifted in their seats. This was different from anything earlier. This wasn't instinct. It wasn't reaction. It looked like decision. The guard turned. Saw her. Vale zoomed in further. You will note, he said quietly, that she did not stop. The guard raised a weapon. The human dropped. Not backward. Downward. Out of the line of aim. The shot missed. She moved immediately into close range. Not elegant. Not clean. A strike. The guard staggered. A second movement. A weapon retrieved. Not used conventionally. Used as force. The hall remained silent, but the silence had changed texture. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was anticipation mixed with disbelief. Vale continued. She did not possess compatible weapon interface anatomy, he said. All use was improvised. The image fragmented into motion blur. Chaos in a narrow zone. 2 guards down. A third engaging. The human moving through blind spots, angles, interruptions. Not faster. Not stronger. Just continuously adapting. Vale's tone tightened slightly. She entered maintenance infrastructure, he said. The hologram followed. A narrow shaft. Confined. Impossible for Drexery physiology to pursue. Inside it, the human disappeared from view. Lights across the cargo bay flickered. Twice. Then went out completely. Total darkness. A few cadets in the hall shifted instinctively. Vale's voice remained steady. Station lighting systems were manually disrupted at power relay level, he said. Secondary systems failed due to cascade overload. The cargo bay turned into void. Only emergency infrared remained. And in that space, movement. Not visible in normal light, but now displayed in thermal overlay. Shapes shifting. Confusion spreading through Drexery forces. Blind firing. Erratic positioning. Loss of control. And something else. A smaller heat signature moving between them. Precise. Vale's eyes did not leave the display. Drexery physiology is dependent on high-spectrum visual input, he said. They do not adapt well to total darkness. The pause. Human physiology does. The movement continued. 1 guard fell. Then another. Not in clean combat sequences. In fragments. Disruption. Interruption. Collapse. Vale's voice dropped. Subject eliminated 4 armed combatants in under 6 minutes. The beat. Survivors, 0 operational control remaining. The cargo bay stabilized into silence. Heat signature still. Hostages clustered in one corner. Protected. Alive. The human stood alone in the center of the room. Breathing heavily. Hands trembling slightly. Holding something metallic. Not victorious. Not triumphant. Just present. Vale let the image hold. No one in the hall spoke. Not because they were told not to. Because there was nothing to say yet. Vale finally continued. She was 14 years old, he said. The pause. And she had no training. The words landed differently now. Not as explanation. As rupture. Vale turned slightly away from the projection. For the first time in the entire lecture, he did not look entirely certain where to place his own attention. Record ends at extraction arrival, he said. All hostile elements neutralized. All civilian lives secured. Silence followed. Incomplete. Then Vale added, softer. And the station did not fall. The hologram dimmed slowly, as if even the system itself needed a moment to recover from what it had displayed. The cargo bay froze in its final state, silent, dark, resolved. No movement. No chaos. Only aftermath. Vale did not immediately continue. That pause itself felt unusual now. In the hall, cadets remained completely still. Not out of discipline, but because something in the room had shifted beyond lecture format. This was no longer information. It had become something closer to exposure. Vale finally spoke. Post-incident analysis, he said. Union response fleet arrived 14 minutes after internal control was re-established. The hologram shifted again, now showing external docking. Emergency craft. Medical teams moving in coordinated waves. No more combat. Only consequence. Drexery boarding force was neutralized or captured, Vale continued. Hostages extracted without further loss of life. A faint ripple moved through the cadets. Relief, but unstable. Fragile. Because the story was not ending the way they expected it to end. Vale did not soften the next part. Subject identity was confirmed during evacuation processing, he said. The display changed. A file appeared. Restricted designation. Personnel tag. Medical scan. Biometric confirmation. A face. Human. The same figure from the cargo bay. Now labeled. Cadet designation. Rena Vasquez. The hall reacted instantly. Not loudly. Not yet. But sharply. A collective tightening. Recognition collapsing into realization. Vale watched it happen. He did not stop it. Age at time of incident, 15 standard cycles, he said. The number landed like weight. Not dramatic. Just final. In row after row, cadets shifted their attention, not to the screen anymore, but to each other. And then, slowly, upward, toward a single section of the hall. Row 14. Vale did not follow their gaze immediately. He already knew where it was going. When he finally turned slightly, it was not surprise in his expression. It was confirmation. Rena Vasquez sat there. Still, hands resting on her datapad. Face unreadable. As if none of this had ever been meant to point at her. The silence stretched. Longer than before. Heavier. Vale spoke quietly. I was not given full access to cadet profiles prior to this lecture, he said. That is a procedural failure. No one responded. No corrective action would have changed the data presented, he added. Still no response. Very carefully, Vale looked directly at her. Cadet Vasquez, he said. Her eyes lifted. No fear. No surprise. Just attention. The hall held its breath without meaning to. Vale continued. You were not included in my initial assessment, he said. That was an error of omission. The pause. I apologize. The words did not sound like formality. They sounded like adjustment. Rena did not respond immediately. Then quietly. It's fine. Not dismissal. Not acceptance. Just fact. That should have ended it. It did not. Because now the hall was no longer looking at the lecture. It was looking at her. Vale stepped slightly back from the projection. The purpose of this lecture, he said, was to demonstrate comparative threat profiles across apex biospheres. A faint shift in his tone. But data integrity requires acknowledgement of anomaly cases. He turned slightly toward the cadets. You have now observed such a case. The room was still unstable. Fear had not fully formed. Respect had not fully formed. Neither category applied cleanly. And that absence of classification was itself unsettling. Vale continued. The human species demonstrates a convergence of traits previously considered evolutionarily incompatible. He gestured once toward the frozen file. Endurance. Cognitive adaptation. Improvisational problem-solving under stress. Cooperative bonding across non-kin species. The pause. Violence is not the defining variable. That line changed the atmosphere again. Sharper now. Focused. Choice is. The hull reacted subtly. Not movement. Understanding tightening into place. Vale looked back at Rena. And yet, he said, your own account contradicts the interpretation of intent. Rena exhaled slowly. She adjusted her grip on the data pad slightly. I didn't choose most of it, she said. I survived it. The pause. Then she added, that's different. Vale did not immediately respond. That distinction mattered. He knew it did. The cadets were beginning to understand something deeper now, not just what happened, but what it cost. Vale spoke again, more carefully this time. Survival under conditions of lethal stress is not unique to your species, he said. Rena nodded once. Yeah, she said. But we remember it. That sentence did something the lecture had not yet done. It removed abstraction. The hall grew quieter again. Vale turned slightly toward the cadets. You are observing, he said, a divergence between biological capability and psychological interpretation of that capability. The pause. In simpler terms, he continued, humans do not experience survival as neutrality. The hologram behind him dimmed further. Memory persists, he said. Meaning is assigned. His eyes shifted briefly back to Rena. And burden follows. A long silence settled. This one different. Less tense. More reflective. Vale finally stepped away from the lectern. A small movement, but symbolically significant. He was no longer fully in control of the narrative. Conclusion, he said. The word felt heavier than before. Humans are not apex predators by dominance. The pause. They are apex predators by consequence. The projection behind him faded almost completely. Only faint residual light remained. And more critically, Vale added, they are the only known species that consistently attempts to restrain what they are capable of becoming. That line landed quietly, but deeply. Vale looked across the hall one final time. End of lecture. No dramatic closing. No final reinforcement. Just cessation. Silence followed, but not emptiness. Something had been left behind. And it was still moving through the room. Slowly. Uncomfortably. Irreversibly. Rena remained seated for a moment longer. Then she closed her data pad. Not like an ending. Like a return. The lecture was over. But the way they looked at her was not. The silence did not break immediately after the lecture ended. It fractured slowly. Like something under pressure finally finding small places to breathe. First came movement, subtle, uncertain. Cadets shifting in their seats without standing, as if unsure whether standing would make what they had just witnessed more real. Then came whispers, layered in different languages, none of them fully capturing what they wanted to say. Vale remained at the lectern, but he no longer spoke. The projection behind him had fully dimmed now. Only faint afterglow remained in the air, like a memory burned into the space. Rena stayed seated for a few seconds longer than necessary. Not because she was calm. Because standing would mean the moment had fully locked into reality. When she finally rose, it was controlled. Familiar. Measured. The same way she always moved, careful steps, minimal wasted motion, eyes already tracking exits, distances, reactions. But now those movements were being noticed. Before, they had been invisible. Now they were being studied. A few cadets instinctively shifted aside as she stepped into the aisle. Not fear exactly. Awareness. She noticed. She always noticed. She did not react to it. That mattered more than anything else. Vale watched her descend the steps from the platform. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something further, but he didn't. Whatever he had planned for this lecture, it had already been rewritten. Rena reached the lower level of the hall. And then something unexpected happened. No announcement. No instruction. A single cadet stood up. A Corvathi. Heavily built. Scaled armor reflecting the low ambient light. The same one who had once laughed at the human. classification earlier in the lecture. He did not speak. He simply placed a hand over his chest, a gesture of acknowledgement in his species tradition. Then he inclined his head toward her. Slowly, deliberately. Not fear. Not submission. Recognition. One by one, others followed. Not all. Not immediately. But enough. A ripple of rising bodies moving through the hall in uneven sequence. Different species. Different interpretations. Same direction of attention. Toward her. Rena stopped walking. Not because she was afraid. Because she was processing. She wasn't used to this version of silence. The kind that watches instead of avoids. Vale finally spoke again from the platform, but his voice was no longer instructional. It appears, he said quietly, that classification alone is insufficient. No one responded. He stepped down from the lectern. For the first time, he was no longer above the room. He walked a few steps forward, then stopped. Not near her. Not far from her. Between. The data presented today, he said, was intended to define threat structures. The pause. But what has been observed is not simply threat. His eyes shifted briefly toward Rena. It is restraint under capacity. That phrase moved through the hall differently. Less fear now. More weight. Rena finally spoke without turning fully toward him. That's a complicated way of saying we try not to hurt people, she said. Vale paused. Yes, he replied. It is. A faint silence followed. Not uncomfortable this time. Reflective. One of the smaller cadets near the middle rows, Felicity species, shifted forward slightly. Then spoke, voice hesitant but clear. Professor, is it true that humans feel fear even when they are stronger than what's threatening them? The question hung in the air. Rena glanced toward the speaker. Then answered before Vale could. Yeah, she said. Sometimes more. The cadet absorbed that slowly. Then why fight? Another voice asked. This time from higher up. A different species. Larger. Heavier tone. Rena exhaled. She didn't answer immediately. When she did, it wasn't dramatic. Because stopping doesn't always feel like an option in the moment, she said. And because someone has to. That answer didn't resolve anything. But it changed the shape of the question. Vale looked at the cadets. You are attempting to apply logic to lived experience, he said. That is necessary. But incomplete. He turned slightly toward Rena. And you are attempting to reduce lived experience into survival memory. The pause. That is also incomplete. Rena nodded once. I know, she said. That was all. The hall remained standing. But no one moved toward the exits yet. Not because they were told not to. Because leaving felt like breaking something unresolved. Rena finally continued walking. This time, the cadets parted without hesitation. Not avoidance. Respectful space. A new pattern forming. She reached the lower exit corridor. Leon was waiting there. For slightly raised. Eyes wide in a way that wasn't fear anymore, but intensity. Emotional overflow barely contained. She stepped forward immediately when she saw Rena. Didn't ask permission. Just closed the distance and walked beside her. Rena didn't flinch this time. She matched pace automatically. Behind them, the hall remained full. Still processing. Still shifting. Vale watched them leave. Then quietly, almost to himself. Predator classification, he said, has always been an external measurement. The pause. But what we observe today. He didn't finish the sentence immediately. Because it wasn't finished. Not yet. Outside the hall, the corridor lights were softer. Less clinical. More neutral. Rena walked in silence for a while. Leon broke it first. You looked like you wanted to disappear back there, she said. Rena almost smiled. Yeah, she admitted. Old habit. Leon glanced up at her. But you didn't. Another pause. Rena thought about that. No, she said. I didn't. They kept walking. Behind them, the lecture hall remained open longer than scheduled. Not because of confusion. Because no one had decided yet what to do with what they now understood. And in that uncertainty, something had changed. Not loudly. Not visibly. but permanently. The galaxy had learned a new definition for danger. And it didn't come from claws or teeth or armor. It came from choice. The corridors outside the lecture hall were quieter than Rena remembered. Not empty, never empty on a station this size, but subdued, as if the entire structure had absorbed the weight of what was said inside and was still adjusting to carrying it. Footsteps echoed differently now. Or maybe she was just hearing them differently. Leon walked beside her without speaking for a while. Her smaller steps matched Rena's pace with a kind of stubborn precision, like she had decided that rhythm itself was something worth defending. Eventually, she spoke. "They're all looking at you," Leon said. Rena didn't turn her head. "I know. You don't seem surprised." The pause. "I'm not," Rena said. "This usually happens after people learn the file version of me." Leon flicked her ears. "But that wasn't you." Rena gave a short exhale that wasn't quite a laugh. "No," she said. "That was an emergency." They walked past a wide viewport. Stars filled the glass in dense clusters, cold and endless. The station lights reflected faintly across Rena's face for a moment, soft lines of illumination moving over still features. Leon slowed slightly. "You don't talk about it much," she said. Rena's eyes stayed on the stars. "There isn't much to say," she replied. "Most of it is just noise. Movement. Trying to find something solid in the middle of it." Leon studied her quietly. "That doesn't sound like the thing they showed," she said. Rena nodded once. "It never does." A silence settled between them again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was measured. Like both of them were aware that certain conversations needed space around them to exist safely. After a moment, Leon asked more carefully, "Are you angry?" Rena didn't answer immediately. Anger would have been simpler. "No," she said finally. "I'm tired." Leon accepted that without pushing. They continued walking. Behind them, deeper in the station, the lecture hall was still full. Not of silence anymore. Of conversation. Fragments spreading, breaking apart, recombining. Different interpretations forming at once. Respect. Confusion. Recalibration. And underneath all of it, a kind of irreversible attention. Inside the hall, Vale stood alone again at the platform. He had not left immediately. He watched the cadets as they slowly began to move, no longer as a unified group, but as individuals carrying different weights of understanding. Some avoided looking toward the exit Rena had taken. Some could not look away from it. Vale's 4 eyes tracked the motion carefully, noticing patterns, recording responses, re-evaluating assumptions. One of the junior instructors approached from the side platform, hesitant. "You should have ended the lecture before the final segment," they said quietly. Vale didn't respond immediately. "No," he said. "That would have preserved the classification error." The instructor hesitated. "You mean her identity disclosure?" Vale shook his head slightly. "I mean the assumption that the subject of study was separate from the observer." That line lingered. The instructor didn't reply. Vale turned back toward the emptying hall. "Fear alone produces incomplete models," he said. "So does admiration." The pause. "What we require now is accuracy." He stepped down from the platform fully. For the first time, he did not return to his notes. Because the notes no longer felt sufficient. Elsewhere in the station, Rena and Leon reached a quieter transit corridor. Less traffic. Dimmer lighting. The kind of space designed for movement rather than gathering. Leon finally broke the silence again. "Do you think they'll be afraid of you now?" Rena thought about it. "They already were," she said. "This just gave them reasons they can name." "That's worse?" Leon asked. Rena shrugged slightly. "It's clearer." They turned a corner. A group of cadets stood ahead in the distance, blocking part of the corridor. Different species. Mixed sizes. They stopped talking as soon as Rena came into view. A familiar pattern. But different now. Not dispersing immediately. Just watching. Rena slowed slightly. Leon matched her instantly, stepping half a pace closer without thinking. Rena noticed that too. The cadets ahead shifted. One of them, larger, armored species, took a step forward. Not aggressive. Just uncertain. Cadet Vasquez, they said. Rena stopped. Leon didn't. She stayed beside her. The cadet hesitated, then inclined their head slightly. We didn't understand earlier, they said. Rena didn't respond right away. She waited. That mattered. The cadet continued. What the professor showed, and what you said, they don't match. Rena exhaled slowly. That's because one is what happens, she said, and the other is what it feels like. The pause. That difference matters more than people think. The cadet absorbed that, then nodded once. Slowly. I see, they said. It didn't resolve everything, but it changed the interaction. They stepped aside. Not hurriedly. Not fearfully. Deliberately making space. Rena passed through. Leon followed. When they were far enough away that the group was no longer audible, Leon spoke again. That was different, she said. Rena nodded slightly. Yeah. Do you want it to stay like that? Leon asked. Rena considered the question for a longer time than before. I don't know, she said. But I don't want it to go back. Leon accepted that. Ahead of them, the corridor opened into a wider junction where station life resumed its usual rhythm, movement, sound, systems operating as designed. But even there, something had shifted. Cadets adjusted how they passed each other. Distances changed. Attention lingered a little longer before moving away. Not fear. Not comfort. Awareness. Rena walked through it without stopping. She didn't look like someone who had been transformed by a lecture. She looked like someone who had been recognized, and wasn't sure yet what that recognition meant. Behind them, far back in the lecture hall, Vale finally opened his notes again. But he did not continue where he left off. Instead, he began writing something new. Not classification. Not report. A revision. And for the first time since the lecture began, the galaxy's definition of human was no longer stable. 3 weeks did not change the station. But it changed how the station moved. At first, the shift was subtle enough that most systems did not register it as deviation. Corridors still carried traffic. Lectures still ran on schedule. Maintenance drones still hummed through their routes with mechanical certainty. But between those predictable structures, something new had formed. Spacing. Awareness. Adjustment. Rena noticed it most in the smallest things. People no longer stepped back from her automatically. They stepped aside deliberately. That difference mattered more than it should have. Leon never stepped aside. She simply stayed close. Always close enough that Rena could feel her presence without needing to check. It had become normal. Which, Rena realized one morning in the training ring, was the strangest part. The ring was nearly empty at this hour. Artificial dawn lighting stretched across the curved interior like a slow sunrise that never fully arrived. The gravity here was slightly adjusted for endurance training, just enough to make movement feel honest. Rena ran. Not fast. Not slow. Controlled rhythm. The kind of motion that allowed thinking without interruption. Leon sat on the edge of the ring, watching. She didn't always come, but often enough that Rena stopped being surprised. When Rena finally slowed to a stop, breathing steady, Leon tilted her head. You always run like something is chasing you, she said. Rena wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. Sometimes it is, she said. Leon didn't ask what. She rarely did. Instead, is it still there? Rena looked down the length of the track. Empty. Quiet. No, she said. Not right now. Leon seemed satisfied with that. The pause. Then softer. You're different than the lecture version. Rena gave a short, tired exhale. That version isn't me, she said. It's what happens when everything else is gone. Leon swung her legs slightly. They were scared of that version. Yeah. Are they still scared? Rena considered it while walking slowly around the inner curve of the ring. Some are, she said. But not the same way. Leon leaned back on her hands. What changed? Rena didn't answer immediately. That was the question everyone was circling, even when they didn't say it directly. Finally, they saw me after, she said. Leon blinked. After what? Rena stopped walking. After I stopped being useful, she said. That line hung for a moment longer than the others. Leon's ears lowered slightly. That doesn't sound right, she said. Rena shrugged. It is what it is. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true anymore. Because something had shifted since that lecture. Not in her. In how others placed her inside their understanding. And that was harder to predict. Later that day, in the Academy Central Hall, Vale stood before a revised lecture slate. The title had changed. Subtle adjustment. But meaningful. Classified Apex Biospheres and Behavioral Divergence in Sapient Species. He stared at it for a moment longer than necessary. Then approved it. Behind him, junior instructors moved carefully, as if unsure where his attention was anchored. One finally spoke. You've revised the classification framework, they said. Vale didn't look up. Yes. To include internal ethical conflict patterns? Yes. The pause. That is not standard zoological methodology, the instructor said cautiously. Vale's 4 eyes lifted slightly. Neither is the subject we are studying. That ended the question. Elsewhere, cadets gathered in smaller groups than before. Discussion had replaced shock. Not fully, but partially. And the topic always returned to the same point. Not the attack. Not the biology. But the contradiction. She said it was panic, one cadet said. But the outcome was still tactical, another replied. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to. Across the hall, a Korvathi cadet stood silently, arms folded. He had not spoken much since the lecture. But when he did, others listened. Strength isn't just force, he said finally. It's control under conditions that remove control. No one argued with that. Because it felt accurate. Not comforting. Accurate. Rena arrived at the navigation lab just as the discussion was settling. She didn't stop at the door. She simply entered. Conversation paused, not abruptly, but naturally, like a system recalibrating around a known variable. Leon followed her inside. As always, a Pelori cadet near the front hesitated, then pushed a datapad slightly to the side. Leaving space. It wasn't fear. It was accommodation. Rena noticed. She didn't comment. She sat. Leon sat beside her. The instructor continued the lesson. But the focus had already shifted. Not away from content. Toward presence. After class, as students filtered out, one of the cadets approached Rena. Not cautiously. Not hesitantly. Just directly. A Felicity cadet, smaller frame, ears upright but steady. You said something during the lecture, she said. Rena looked up. The cadet continued. You said kindness is something you choose against instinct. Rena nodded slowly. I did. The cadet studied her for a moment. Is it hard? She asked. Rena didn't answer immediately. Because the honest answer wasn't simple. Yes, she said finally. But so is everything else worth doing. The cadet accepted that without needing more. Then she did something unexpected. She stepped forward. And sat down beside her. Not across. Not at distance. Beside. Leon glanced at Rena briefly. Rena didn't move away. She stayed still. That mattered too. In Vale's office that evening, the revised paper draft expanded across multiple holographic panels. The title had changed again. Now it read, On the Emergence of Ethical Self-Constraint in Apex Predatory Sapients. Vale reviewed the first section. Then the second. Then stopped. His 4 hands rested still. For a long moment, he did not type. Because for the first time in his career, classification was no longer the hardest part. Interpretation was. And somewhere far from his office, Rena stood at a viewport with Leon beside her, watching the stars continue their indifferent expansion. But now, for the first time in a long time, she was not being observed as an anomaly. She was being understood as a possibility.